Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits Encounters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue part 2 of a 3-part series associated with some encounters, ghostly encounters, that a user called Sleepy Melfo had. One that they posted there on the reddit.com website, there on the subreddit Real Ghost Stories. If you haven't had a chance yet, check out part 1. I'll include the link for it below. It showcases some encounters that primarily occurred to most of the other people that the user knew growing up and then living throughout various times of their life. In this case though, part 2, she'll focus more on their own personal experiences, and then it'll be interesting to see what'll happen in part 3. But otherwise, it's a good detailed set of accounts that showcase some of the more memorable instances with apparently a ghost that likes to make its presence known multiple times as well, and then also gives a little bit of a fright too. One can only imagine essentially having a roommate that's basically another ghost member. It's pretty freaky stuff when you think about it. But yes, let's go ahead and let's share part 2. They titled it as My Personal Experiences. So here's what they stated. Now, for my personal experiences, these are all of the things that happened to me, though some involve my siblings as well, and I will tell them in chronological order. I will preface with the fact that my mom was very sickly. She had a really serious disease her entire life and was on her deathbed when I was a child, more times than I can count. One of those times, my youngest siblings, Leah and Michael, were staying at my grandmother's house while Luis, Kate, and myself were at home alone. Kate and I were very close and shared a room, so we were always together. And on this particular day, we were digging through a box of my mom's things that was on a bookshelf next to the baby monitor. As we snooped through the box and found random junk, we heard the baby monitor beside us start picking up sound. As we watched, the 3 red dots acknowledge that the volume was increasing. This was like 2003, 2004, so it was an old school monitor. We heard distinct cries for mommy. It was a little child crying for their mommy, sobbing. We sat in terror for a few seconds as the realization that we were home alone swept over us, and then we ran to Luisa's room and banged on her door to tell her about it. She came to listen, but the moment was over, and you could no longer hear the crying. It was horrifying, but again, we knew it was ghosty and then just moved on. More that happened to Kate and me was in our bedroom. We had a dollhouse that my mom painted and put real wallpaper up in it and made it really just amazing. We loved to have it in our room, across the room, and in the center of our beds. On more than one occasion, Kate and I would be laying in our beds and we would hear the dollhouse furniture moving around. There was no mistaking it. The furniture would clatter. I had glass mini tea sets for the dolls, and we would hear those hit the floor of the dollhouse, and so on. In the morning, the dollhouse would be trashed. This only happened with the lights out, but Kate and I would be shaking under our covers, trying to hide. We could see each other in our beds, so we knew it wasn't one of us doing it. I can remember us peering out from the covers and just staring at each other, terrified, until it stopped. It was almost like an earthquake hit just a dollhouse, if that makes sense. We chalked it up to ghosty, just wanting to play too, but still, that was creepy. The next thing that happened to me was the first day of school, my 6th grade year. My school started at 8:30 while my other siblings were like 7:45. Because of this, my mom left me at home while she carpooled the others to their schools. I was sitting in the recliner in the den watching the Weather Channel, and all of a sudden, I hear something running around upstairs in what was Luisa's room at the time. I knew for a fact I was home alone, and I was terrified. It just kept running around and around, clear, heavy footsteps. I sat there for a few minutes waiting for it to stop before I finally ran out to the yard and hugged my dog crying until my mom got back. She freaked out seeing me outside, but when I told her what happened, she said, "Oh, it's just ghosty," and I went on to school. I told her then that I would never be home alone, and I never was until my 20s. There were also many times I would be up alone at night. I would be reading books in the playroom, and I would hear the kitchen cabinets and drawers opening and closing, slamming over and over. I would get up and investigate, but when I'd go into the kitchen, nobody would be there, and I'd just shrug it off as ghosty and then go back to reading. This may come across as weird, but we were so desensitized to these kinds of stuff as children that it was just a part of life for us. Maybe that was just a way of a coping mechanism. I don't know, but little things were always happening. Another thing happened in Luis's room that was creepy but harmless. We were in a room and talking about the ghost and then heard something scratching at the door. We opened the door, but nothing was there, so we tried to close it back. However, something was stopping it from closing. We could see there was nothing in the doorway, but some invisible force was stopping us from closing, even with pushing with all of our weight against the door. Finally, we stood back and said, "Fine, you can come in." We tried to close the door again, and this time it shut without any trouble. The worst thing that happened to me prior to the whisper incident was maybe a year or so after the previous one, so maybe 2007. My mom had just gotten new carpet, and everything that was in her bedroom was squeezed into her bathroom and walk-in closet. I, being the nosy little kid that I was in my mom's room, and I decided to snoop into her bathroom and see the thing she had under her bed, a known place she hid presents for us. So I was all alone in this completely empty room. There was no furniture or anything. It was just empty with fresh new carpet. I started to creep inside the bathroom. I had to carefully step over and around things to make sure I didn't crush or break anything. At one point, I looked down and I saw this retro chain ladder thing you would throw out a window as a fire escape in case of a fire. At that very moment, I hear a deep, gasping breath behind me, like it was gasping for air. I'll never forget that sound. I turned around and I didn't see anything. My first instinct was that my siblings were playing a prank on me. And so I got out of the bathroom and looked around the empty room to see if there was anywhere someone could hide. The one spot that would hide someone was this little corner thing that stuck out from the doorway. I laughed and said out loud, "Very funny." And as I walked towards that corner, but when I turned, I saw that there was still nobody there. At the same time, I stepped back and the lights start flickering on and off throughout the room. When this started, I ran downstairs crying, and then I found Kate. Kate laughed at me and said I was lying, but I begged her to come upstairs with me, and reluctantly she did. As we go to this empty room, she sighs and says, "See, I told you nothing was happening." And right then, the light started flickering again, and we both ran downstairs as fast as we could. It was horrifying and important because this will come up again with the whisper incident. Over the years, there were many, many more things that happened in our house. These are only the significant ones that I feel are more important than for what happens next. Unfortunately, my mom is now dead and can't tell you more stories because she experienced the most out of anyone. We believe that the ghost adopted her as her mom. She was always comfortable showing herself to my mom, and as previously mentioned, called her mommy, both to my mom and that time at least that we heard her on the baby monitor. My mom loved the ghost. She loved hearing her and experience her. Maybe part of why we were not as afraid as we should have been was because of how readily my mom accepted everything that happened. Anyway, this brings us to the whisper incident, the single most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I am already in tears and shaking just typing this because it was so bad and so horrifying to me, both as a mother and watching what happened to my daughter. Here goes. And then that's it. That's everything that the user states, at least for part 2, leaving it in a little more of a cliffhanger. And they do have part 3 as well. I saw that as well, so I'll chronicle it on the next video. But let's go ahead and let's talk about part 2 here. Lots of things, right, with this ghosty. Ghosty definitely made their presence known in the last video, those encounters that were mentioned there, and they continue to do so here. First with that really creepy encounter with the baby monitor. Something about hearing something like paranormal coming through an old speaker box that is just so eerie. Anyone remember that game that was there briefly for a while, that beautiful, beautiful game called PT? Anyone remember that weird demonic type voice that talked in another language that was coming through an old radio? That's what I imagined here, just a creepy, staticky sound coming through the monitor saying mommy, and that's enough to give the chills when it comes to that. Luckily on our ghost hunts, me and when I do them by myself or the group that I'm in, we haven't heard anything like that. We've had stuff coming out when it comes to EVP sessions, like playing through a speaker, but nothing along those lines. So that's at least good. But otherwise, that would definitely take things to another level. It was interesting as well with regards to the dollhouse encounter. It's a small encounter, but still enough. Something that showcases that this ghost can definitely move real things. That takes another level as well when it comes to the paranormal. You normally don't hear that stuff. It takes a lot of effort for ghosts to make any kind of activity, whether it's a sound or whether it's visual. But here in this case, they're actually moving things and on a continuous basis. Not just that, but with the kitchen, with the clattering of sounds, and then of course the footsteps heard on the second floor. It just goes on and on. It was interesting too about that encounter involving the door, because it reminds me of one that occurred to our group while we were visiting a former member that was in the group, their house out in the middle of almost nowhere, Texas. This house was actually a house that also has a ghost. It's the ghost of a family member, like a long lost family member some generations back. And I was there. I witnessed an encounter with a doorway. It's the front door. Imagine this. Door is closed, and then in front of the door is a screen door, the kind that's used, of course, to keep out mosquitoes and so on. That's closed as well. So there's only a teeny tiny little spot between the door and the screen door, and that tiny space where that hook is, where the door essentially is closed and that hook for the screen door is caught within the other area, within that little circle and whatever that's called. So we heard it. We were talking there in the living room area. Door was closed. Screen door was closed. If anyone opened the screen door, we would have clearly heard that rickety sound that screen doors make, right? And that would have clearly alerted us that somebody was there. But no, we never heard anything. But next thing we knew, something actually lifted up the handle of the door and then pushed the door forward. So, in other words, this door was closed, but there's a way to open it by lifting up a notch and then pushing the door forward. And it did it. We heard that. We heard it. We saw the door open. None of us were recording at the time. Otherwise, that could have been a great encounter. And then, of course, we saw the screen door completely closed. So somebody did it. Whatever that go, we think it was that relative ghost. Whatever they were doing, they were saying hello. And that reminded me of this encounter with that doorway. But fascinating stuff, right? When it comes to part 2, lots of personal experiences for this user. Anyone else have any more comments? Anything else that I missed? Please post those below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.